What's your reaction, first of all, to that Supreme Court judgment that it's Parliament that has to trigger Article 50?
Oh, I think it's very good news. There's a clear decision. We know where we're going. We've got a clear timetable. There's going to be no grey areas. They're absolutely emphatic that the devolved institutions should not be involved. And David Davis said umpteen times on the floor just now in the statement that we will stick to the March timetable. So I was actually looking beyond that. I asked him about the Great Repeal Bill, and he said at the moment the intention is to bring in the bill during the Queen's speech, and it'll obviously take up most of the summer, because there'll be endless opportunities then to discuss the detail.
Will Article 50 get delayed, do you think? As we were just mentioning there's plenty of people already preparing lots of amendments to this bill whenever it's introduced.
Well, I think they'd be very unwise to try and slow it up, because there's a clear vote by the British people, the 17.4 million, which is to leave. And most of the questions today were about the detail, which will come up in the Great Repeal Bill. So David was very clear on the floor. They're going to come forward early next week, as I understand, with a tight, short bill, which will not lend itself to many amendments. But I think those who want to slow things up would be unwise.
Well, I mean, we were talking to the SNP. They were saying Scotland didn't vote for leaving the European Union, it voted to remain.
Well, without being brutal to the SNP, what part of 3 words do they not understand? You lost twice. There was a very clear vote to stay within the United Kingdom, and this was an all-United Kingdom vote, and 17.4 million people voted to leave. I think much more serious about this is the absolutely shattering impact it would have on the integrity of the whole political establishment, I think the media establishment, possibly the judicial establishment, if this was not delivered. So a very clear message from the government today. Article 50 will be triggered by the end of March, and we push on to the Great Repeal Bill in the summer.
If it hadn't been for that whole case that went to the High Court and then to the Supreme Court, Parliament wouldn't be considering this, would it? This triggering of Article 50.
Well, I don't want to dismiss it. I mean, it's not. I didn't see this as an enormously important issue, because the real detail is the repeal bill. And as someone who wanted to get powers back to Parliament, I'm not the least bit flinching about having a vote. But I do think the government was vindicated in having the appeal, because there was a split decision on the main question.
Yeah, Keir Starmer said it was a waste of time and money appealing to the Supreme Court.
Well, that was an extraordinary comment, wasn't it? Absolutely bizarre thing to say. No, I think...
Well, didn't the government know it would lose?
No, I think the fact there was a split decision showed they were vindicated. But of course there are whole other areas that came into this. It's not just a question of Article 50, which is a massive issue for us at the moment. There are future treaties and other international issues which have always been part of the prerogative. So that's what they were defending. But I think the law lords have given a very clear verdict, and we've now got a clear timetable. And I said no grey areas about the devolves, which could have been complicated. And I think we push on. So I'm very confident Article 50 will now be done by the end of March, which is excellent and gives clarity. The biggest danger at the moment is uncertainty. I was in Berlin on Saturday. We had a really interesting discussion with a lot of senior figures. There were people who'd worked in the Commission, people in the government, people from trade associations, people directly involved in business. And it came out that the biggest problem we've got would be uncertainty. And we had a really interesting conference. And what's good now, I could go back to Germany. I've been invited to go back to some places and say, look, we've got a clear timetable.